Uh, Question for the morning. What is purgatory? Catholics have a very strong belief in it. Why? Where does it originate?
That's a Western, ain't it?
That's a Western. Yeah, it's a Western movie somewhere in Texas. You ever wonder about that? Purgatory? Where it originated from? Basically, it came from the Catholics, and it's in the Apocrypha of the Catholic Bible. That's those dozen or so books in between the Old Testament and the New Testament in the Protestant Bible. Everything written in our Bible was written by someone who personally witnessed the events. The books in the Apocrypha were written about 2, 3, and 400 BC. So it was like 200, 300, 400 years after the event. And so it would be hearsay at best, maybe accurate hearsay, but hearsay at best. It wasn't, nobody was 400 years old and witnessed the events. So that's why a lot of those books were not included in our Bible. That was one qualification. It had to be witnessed by somebody who was alive and wrote down what they witnessed. Secondly, it first pops up in 2 Maccabees, which is in the Apocrypha, and that was written in 238 BC, or 238 years after Christ. So it was written by somebody who hadn't actually seen Christ, heard Christ, or watched what Christ did. So that's why we didn't accept it. It began to be preached heavily somewhere around 1050 and up until about 1400, and that was known as the Dark Ages. And basically, now I'm not trying to beat up on Catholics, okay? I got a lot of good Catholic friends. And most of my in-laws are Catholics on Janice's side. So I don't know any Catholics I don't like. And I think they love Jesus just like everybody else. But just like every denomination, all denominations have their black sheep. You know about Jimmy Swaggart and Jimmy Baker and all those guys. Well, there were some bad popes along the way too. And they are embarrassing to the Catholic Church. Well, along about that period of time, it was the Dark Ages, and everybody was poor, and the church wasn't able to collect a lot of money, and so they came up with this doctrine of purgatory and indulgences, and you could buy your loved one out of purgatory by making donations to the church, by lighting a candle, but you had to buy each candle from the priest, and by praying to the saints and having the saints go on their behalf before God. And of course there was always money and collection involved, and that went along good for about 400 or 500 years, and then it became mandatory, and then they began twisting arms, and then it became threatening. If you don't donate and if you don't do this, that, or the other, then I will not, your loved one will never get out of purgatory and will never see heaven, and it'll be your fault. It doesn't happen anymore, right?
The mob had a lot to do with a lot of that too.
The what?
The mob.
The mob.
Protection and stuff, you know, you were paid protection and paid, you know. It was
Yeah, that same kind of a thing, yeah. Okay, when I first became a postmaster of French Lit, lady, I preached in a ladies' church one Sunday morning, and she came by the post office the next day and she was crying. And I asked her what she was crying about. She said, well, I just left, Father John just left my house, and he came by for the monthly donation to help my husband get out of purgatory. And said, my car broke down this month and I had a lot of extra bills, and I told him that John would just have to stay in purgatory a little while longer because this month I didn't have any money. And he kind of read her the riot act, and she came over to my office and was crying in my office. And so it's still even hanging around out there a little bit. Bottom line is, purgatory was a place you went if you received the last rites and you were a Catholic, but you were a scoundrel. You had to go to purgatory, you had to pay penance, you had to be purified in purgatory before you could go into heaven. Now, if you weren't a Catholic, you were going to go to hell anyway, and it didn't make a difference. Okay. That's what got Martin Luther going, because that kind of teaching was just extortion, and he couldn't, with a good conscience, he couldn't do it anymore. And so that's how the Lutheran Church got born, because they were putting all this pressure on people who were barely feeding their kids to make the church rich. And it was wrong. So if we've got any Catholics in here, I hope it didn't make you mad. It's just history and it's the truth. But like I said, I've got a lot of great Catholic friends, and I don't have a problem with Catholics by and large for any reason at all. But I'm not going to pray to Mary. No. Any questions? Okay. The box is there. If you have any questions, write them down, throw them in there. Proverbs, chapter 14, verse 20. Oh, Alicia's not here. She can't read this week.
She
Okay,
can't talk. She don't
Josh
have-
will make you do it.
She doesn't have a voice. It's kind of nice.
Uh-oh.
Where are we at now?
Proverbs 14:20.
The poor are shunned even by their neighbors, but the rich have many friends.
What do you think? What do you think? The poor are hated even by their neighbors, but rich have many friends. Is that true or false? I didn't say
Not
is it
true.
right or wrong.
Not
I said
true
is it
friends.
True or false.
Not true friends.
Yeah.
Good point. Great point. Not true friends. What's it called? Fair weather friends. Why do you think the rich have more friends than the poor?
People want
Some of
more.
that gold to fall off of them, so they can pick it up.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Anybody else?
They-
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
They're friends with them because they think that they'll get more if they're friends with them. You know,
Okay.
they kind of buy friends kind of.
Okay.
They want what the other person has, and if the poor don't have anything, they don't want them.
Okay. Anyone else?
Might make them feel important.
Yeah, it makes them feel important. They get to hobnob or elbow with the rich guys. Isn't that true?
A lot of them out there.
What's a true test of friendship? I know a lot of people who are friendly. But what about real friends? What's the true test of friendship?
You're broke down in the middle of nowhere at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they come and get you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Remember somebody told me one time that you can count your true friends on one hand.
You count your true friends on one hand. Well, I know a lot of people that are friendly, but let me ask you this. You've all got something that you would rather not the whole world found out, right? Don't you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not going to ask you to tell me. I don't want to know. But we've all got some little secret in the closet that we would just rather the whole world didn't find out. Now, ask yourself this question. How many people do you know that you could tell that secret to and know for a fact, for a certainty, that it would never, ever leave that room? More than 5?
Nope.
It's sad. We ought to have at least 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Shouldn't we? Shouldn't Christians at least be able to trust each other? I mean, the world, yeah, they're gonna take it straight to the gossip column. But shouldn't we have confidence in each other? Why don't we? Because we've proven you can't trust me. Haven't we? There was a great conqueror one time, I think it was Genghis Khan, but I forget for sure. He said, the Christian army is the only army that ever marched across the face of the earth shooting its own wounded. That's sad. It took a heathen to say that. He did it by just watching us. You know, you ought to have total and complete confidence that if you end up in jail next Thursday night, you'll see my face at the visiting hours.
Smiling, probably.
Bail against Nick?
I hope you be bailing me out tomorrow.
Yeah, sometimes you just need a little. But we ought to be able to trust each other. And the sad truth is, we can't. A lot of times we just act like the rest of the world. I've said it before and I'll say it again. My wife hates it when I say it. But I don't have a drunk that owes me a dime. But my good Christian buddies have borrowed thousands and thousands of dollars from me and said they'd pay it back and never, ever paid back a penny. I don't go knock on their door and I don't toss and turn about it at night. But the sad, sad truth is, I can probably trust a drunk better than some people I know who call themselves Christians. I give it to them because basically I feel like I'm giving it to God, and if they don't pay it back, that's their sin, and God has always blessed me and replaced it, so I'm not going to grieve it. But it is a sad commentation on Christianity when you cannot trust the people in the church. We need to be different.
Does that go a little bit both ways though? Because if you got something that you're protecting that's dirt on yourself, you know full good and well that if you don't want it known, best thing that you can do is not tell a soul.
Yes, true.
So how much of that is the individual not exercising their own faith in people that they trust?
True.
Or mostly trust.
But there are a lot of times, I think, when I could deal with my problems a lot easier if I had a couple people praying for me in the background. And I need to know that those people will actually pray for me and support me rather than running to the biggest gossip in town and saying, boy, have I got a story for you. That's ugly.
It says that we're supposed to tell our sins to one another amongst ourselves, right?
Yeah, James chapter 5, we're to one another, not to the world.
Yeah, that's what I mean, but you can't even do that, really.
James chapter 5, we're supposed to confess our sins to one another, pray for one another, and the prayer of the righteous availeth much, and we will be lifted up and strengthened. Okay? I would never tell a soul, but then everybody says that, so you can't be sure. And you can't be sure because you've been hurt. You can't be sure because you have been wounded, and I have been wounded, and so we come to the point where we can't trust anybody, and the truth of the matter is we should be able to, and maybe we can, but we're afraid to reach out and try because it goes bad so often. 21.
He who despises his neighbor's sins, but blessed is he who is kind to the needy.
Right. He who despises his neighbor's sins, but he who has mercy on the poor, happy is he. What do you think?
My NIV version's a little left me hanging here. The first what you read? Do you feel like there's something missing
Yeah, it's
there?
like
Yeah.
yeah, it is a little weird.
He who, read it again, because
He
my
who-
glasses are lost. I can see the line of my point.
You didn't loan them to your neighbor, did you?
Why is the word poor important here?
Because they don't have anything to give back.
Don't have anything to give back. You give to the rich man, you're expecting a favor later on, aren't you? Or might be. Rich people won't let you give them things. I remember when I was carrying mail in Indianapolis, we had a new house up north, and I was trying to make a garden. And you could have made clay bricks out of the ground that our house was built on. I mean, it was hard as a brick. And so I'm driving around on my route I had these mansions, these big beautiful mansions called Golden Hills in Indianapolis. And these people never let a weed seed touch the ground. I mean, when they had grass clippings, these grass clippings were pure. And the leaves, they would bag them up and set them out on the street corner. So I stopped one day and I was delivering mail, and I said, "What are you going to do with those leaves and whatever out there?" He said, "Well, we're just put them out there for the garbage man." He said, "We have to give him a little tip or he won't take but 5 bags." So they were bribing the garbage man. I said, "Well, would you mind if I picked them up? Because I put them up. I put them on my garden, and I'd love to have them." And he said, no, come back and get them. So I went back and get them, and I loaded them up on the truck, and I was getting ready to leave. He ran out, and he handed me a $50 bill. And, we had a new house, and we were just getting started, and $50 was a bunch of money. But I said, no. I said, "You're doing me a favor, just let me have leaves." He said, "Take it or unload the leaves." So he took it. He said, "Rich people don't want to owe anybody anything because they're afraid you're going to come back and ask a favor later on." He said, "Just take the $50. He said, "And next week there'll be $50 more and another bag of leaves until we get them all raked out." I said, "Well, gee, if you insist."
There really was gold in them our hills.
Just get a whole trailer and head to Golden Hill.
I started bringing I borrowed a trailer from him.
Money
And I was
grows.
picking up leaves. I'm making more money picking up leaves than I was working for the post office.
What's this guy's address? What's this guy's address?
Golden Hills, Indianapolis, 38th Street and 38th and right there where the Golden Hill Cemetery is. But rich people don't want to be beholden to anybody because they're afraid you're going to come knock on the door and say, "Hey, I called off all your leaves. You owe me. Would you give me a loan at your bank, or would you do this, or would you do that?" And they don't want to owe anybody anything because they're afraid it's going to cost them something later. But if you help the poor, there's real mercy there because there's not a chance in the world you're going to get anything in return. And for it to be a true gift, it has to be a sacrifice. It has to cost you something. I've said it before, when that first tomato comes on, the Bible says give away your first fruits of your garden. When that first tomato comes on and I'm sitting there and I'm watching it, and then it's going to be ripe tomorrow, and I'm thinking, and all of a sudden the verse in the Bible always pops up in my head. It said, the first fruits belong to God. And so I picked that first tomato and I'd give it away. My first fruits.
Does that count if the critters get your first fruits?
Say what?
Does that count if the critters get your first fruits?
Yeah, if God
You're
does
feeding
it.
his creatures.
Does that work
Not
like
if you throw it at
Yeah.
wife?
You gave it to your wife?
Give it to your wife.
No,
It's
because
like
you're-
that. It's
You're
like the-
one with your wife. You just give it to yourself.
I thought it would be like the roof scene from Shawshank Redemption.
Not gonna work.
Tell the guard to give the money to his wife.
You just give it to her to cut so you can have some.
I didn't say she had to share. I'm just saying she better watch it like a hawk. But
Now, getting back I give you the last tomato of the year?
Oh,
And I'm
no.
already sick of tomatoes, and I'm just trying to beg somebody to take them. Where's the sacrifice? There's no sacrifice there. But boy, that first tomato, I've been waiting for 6 months for that thing to turn red, and I've already bought the bacon. You know? That's a sacrifice.
Yeah.
22.
Do they not err that devise evil, but mercy and truth shall be to them that devise good?
All right. So, evil will lead you astray, and mercy and truth will bring you to good. True or false?
True.
Hmm?
True.
It's true. Any questions on that? 23?
All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty.
In all labor there is profit, but idle chatter leads only to poverty.
Goes back to the Ten Commandments kind of, doesn't it?
Say again?
It goes back to the Ten Commandments, how what, 6 or 8 of the commandments is your tongue. Thou shalt not lie, you know what I'm talking about?
Okay.
Not just saying you're gonna do it.
Right.
Right.
Politics.
I was thinking the grasshopper. I was thinking the grasshopper and the ant.
He's over here.
I drove all the way to Muncie this week to pick up my hearing aids, and they said all the parts didn't come in. Now, they called me Tuesday and said, you absolutely need to let me know before Thursday if you're not going to be here or going to be late, because Thursday's going to be a busy day. That was Tuesday. They never said a word about not having the ear molds. So you're going to have to put up with me just another week, I guess. Let's look at this. What is the relationship between labor and profit that is not between idle chatter and poverty? There's a relationship between labor and profit that you don't find between idle chatter and poverty.
Pride.
Hmm?
Pride.
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 Pride? Okay.
Doing good jobs.
It's productive,
Yeah, productivity.
productive, and, idle talk is not productive.
Okay. A sense of pride of accomplishing something. Then there's work ethic or the effort put out. You know, if you give a kid a bicycle at Christmas and you have this other kid that you make work for the bicycle and earn the $100, which bicycle is going to be put up every night? Hmm?
The
one
one
you-
that worked.
The one where the kid had to work, had to save his money, had to put some effort into it. There's going to be more value in that bicycle than there is in the one